Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to show you how to get a phenomenal solo sound that gives you a great playing feel and really gets under the listener's skin. Stay tuned. Modern Guitar School is online. A very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Christian Moser. I've been a professional guitarist for 30 years, and I'd like to share my experience and knowledge with you here on this channel. The guitar solo in a song is probably the most emotional moment for us guitarists, because that's where we put the most of our personality into it. All the more it surprises me that very few guitarists, especially here on YouTube, give any thought to tone quality or sound aesthetics and play with a sound that resembles an electric razor. A good saxophonist wouldn't play on a watering can either. That's why today I'm going to show you how to set up a good rock solo sound that makes you feel good while playing and really gets under the listener's skin. I'm using this clip today as the first example of how you can create a good solo sound in the simplest way possible. You saw me there with my band Red Circuit. That's my former metal band. And we played in Atlanta, USA at the Brock Power Festival. It's the second largest progressive rock festival in the world. And there the rule was, amp is provided, cabinets are provided, just bring your guitar. If needed, you could also bring some effects. So I had to figure out how to craft my solo sound. With this band, high gain was the order of the day. It's a metal band. And there were a lot of guitar solos in the set. When it comes to guitar solos, I like, and you probably do too, for my volume to be a bit higher so that the guitar stands out more in the mix. After all, you can't assume that the guy at the mixing desk knows when a solo is coming up and when to turn you up. Most of the time it's a sound engineer you don't know who isn't familiar with the songs at all. So I have to take care of it myself. For me, that means I want a volume boost. I always like about 3 dB more. And for my solo sound, I also want a certain amount of effects. In this case, a bit of delay, so it really sings. Let me show you what I mean. Nice sustain. The solo you just heard ends with a melodic sequence where the notes are held for a long time, and it really stands out beautifully. I wanted to support that with a bit of delay, so I needed higher volume. About 3 decibels more, and I needed some delay. The simplest method that came to mind was to take my vintage delay from TC Electronics and put it in the effects loop, because that way I have the option to increase the volume with the delay, tap in the tempo, and when I turn it on I get a bit more volume and the effect on the guitar. That's how I solved the problem in Atlanta. Simple method. I'll bring up the delay so you can see it. And we can also quickly talk about the parameters again. So, okay, let's start at the top left with the delay level. The delay level determines how much of the delay is mixed into your guitar signal. I'll show you the setting at 70%. So when played alone, you can already hear a relatively strong ratio. I'll set the delay level to 0 so you can hear the difference. And you'll notice it loses its sense of space, it doesn't sound as big anymore. So make sure to mix in a healthy amount of delay so the effect comes through. In a band context, it's actually even less than what you can perceive right now. Let's move on to the next parameter, right next to it. Output level, that's the knob I already described to you. You should add a bit of volume here so that when you turn on the delay, the volume increases a little and your solo really stands out. Okay, bottom left, feedback. Feedback means how many times the delay repeats the sound. I'll show you the setting at 30% with a dead note. That's when you can hear it best. And you'll notice how many times the repeat comes back. I'll set the repeat to 5%. And then you have this. So 1 repeat and then it's gone. You can go ahead and mix in a bit more so that it creates a bit more spaciousness. I always have it set about like this. That way it sounds nice and big and stereo through the PA. Delay time right next to it is basically unnecessary when you're playing because this delay has a tap tempo button This means that when you're playing along with a song, you step on this button 2, 3, or 4 times at quarter note intervals, and that gives the delay the information about the timing of your taps, which should be in time, so it knows what interval to use, and the repeats will come exactly in rhythm with the taps you entered. This ensures that your delay sounds nice and musical, and the repeats come in rhythm, which is when it sounds best. So those would be the settings for the delay. On site in Atlanta, as I mentioned, there were a lot of rectifiers and other guitar amps. So of course I chose the dual rectifier and put the delay in the effects loop. An effects loop is a tap between the preamp and the power amp of an amplifier, because that's basically where you have the least loss, and that's exactly where a delay belongs. The preamp is where tone shaping and distortion are created. Then comes this send return tap. Send goes into the input of the delay, and return comes out of the delay, and then the signal with the delay goes into the power amp, basically gets amplified, and then goes to the speakers. So it's really simple. One effects unit, and I've covered the topic. So this is the best solution if you own an amp with an effects loop. Just insert an effects unit in between. It could even be an old Boss GT10, a great device with good converters. With that, you have even more possibilities. Basically, all Boss devices are built into it. You can get it nowadays for 150 euros. So it's a great way to improve your sound in the effects loop, or you can use the 4-cable method. But I think I'll do a separate workshop on that. That would take at least another 10 minutes to explain here. Okay, then let's switch over to the modelers. That could be a Kemper, a Fractal Audio, a Helix. It really doesn't matter. The approach is always the same. And I'll show you from scratch how to set the whole thing up. People who use tube amps don't need to tune out now, because the editing process is actually exactly the same. It's just much easier to demonstrate with an editor than with a real amp. First and foremost, it's important that you don't use a completely different amp for your solo sound. I use really good profiles of Friedman amps live. For me, that's the modern Marshall variant, but it doesn't sound quite as metallic as a dual rectifier. So that means my rhythm sound is a Friedman amp, and the solo sound is the same amp, just with different settings. More gain, a bit louder, a bit more ambience, and that's exactly what I'm going to show you, how that works. If you want more information on getting a good rhythm sound in rock and metal, feel free to check out my 2 workshops. There I explain the settings for a good rock guitar sound and for a good metal guitar sound. Take a look. Okay, let's start again right at the beginning of the signal chain. With the guitar, as always, that's simply the source of your sound. Here, I would again recommend a guitar with humbuckers, with medium to high output. That works really well. Because if you send more signal into the amp, it will distort more quickly. Here I'm using my Les Paul Premium Plus again with EMGs. It really sings beautifully. And besides, I also played it live back then at the Brock Power. It's exactly the same guitar. And that way I think it's also the most authentic for you. So, the choice of pickup. Let's start with that. The neck pickup, for example, has a warm singing sound. Let me show you that here. The bridge pickup is a bit more biting, a bit brighter. The same thing again with the bridge pickup. Can you clearly hear the difference? More treble, it cuts through more, and of course the neck pickup sounds a bit creamier. So that's the first step, a good sounding guitar with lots of output and good playability, so you can play really great solos. High frets are also a factor. They make bending easier and prevent you from scraping against the fretboard. So high frets are also highly recommended for tapping, legato runs, and so on. Okay. Next step, as I said, is the amp profile. So you need an amp that suits your sound preferences. I've mentioned this in other workshops before. It's never been as easy as it is today. You just look online for the amp your favorite guitarist or favorite band uses. So based on the sound you prefer, check out what these people are playing and get yourself a profile of that amp. You can buy them online everywhere for just a few euros. And then you already have the foundation for your solo sound that you really like. That gets you very close to that direction. Now you just have to shape the tone. So let's start right at the beginning with the gain stage. Gain means distortion. I'll show you the display from my Kemper. That way you can follow along easily. So now the gain, I'm all the way to the left here, is set to 3.3. That means I only have a slightly overdriven sound, which doesn't sustain for long and doesn't have much sustain. But of course I want a singing lead sound, so I'll turn it up to around 6.8 or 7, because then you get more distortion, the note sustains longer, and the tone sings better. So let's compare again. If you still feel like you don't have enough gain, try using a Tubescreamer in front of it. That's actually been the secret tip for about 100 years, using a Tubescreamer before the amp's input stage. I've explained this in the other workshops as well, to have a bit more volume before the amp and thus drive the input stage harder. The tone also gets a bit more definition, a bit more attack, and it becomes a bit more mid-focused, which increases its ability to cut through. So I'll show you this on the display here. When you turn on the Tubescreamer, you'll see the volume is slightly increased. It's not about the drive, that's almost at 0. And as I said, this gives you a bit more silkiness in your tone. After the Tubescreamer, I turned on a noise gate, because with this sound, the noise would otherwise be quite high. We're already running quite a bit of gain, and the Tubescreamer increases it even more. But now let's get to the most important point, the EQ. This amp profile has been copied in such a way that the EQ is now set to 0, but that wasn't the case with the amp when it was copied. So for you, this means that with the real amp, you don't set the EQ like this. You have to see how your EQ works and listen for which frequencies are bothering you. For me personally, the absolute worst solo sound is when it sounds like an electric razor, as I always say. So if it has too much treble, it cuts and is annoying in the high end. I'll try to recreate that here. You hear what I mean? It really saws. It's not a nice tone. So let's turn down the treble. Let's turn down the presence. You can be a bit more generous with the bass, because the notes I just played don't really have much bass content anyway. That means you can go ahead and add a bit more bass. Let's do the whole thing again with the better settings. I tried to play roughly the same notes as before. So now even in the higher ranges you don't have any annoying cutting tone. Not even on the bridge pickup. And that means this sound is actually already ready for the stage. There's one more thing we need to set, namely for your solo sound you should have about 3 dB louder than your regular sound, so it stands out a bit and you're not dependent on the guy at the mixing desk to notice and turn you up at the right moment. Those guys usually have enough to do and sometimes don't even know the songs at all, so you can't count on being turned up for your solo. It's better to take care of it yourself. The mixer will thank you for it. I'll show you that as well. So you go into the rig here and there's a setting called rig volume. I actually have it set to 3.4 and my rhythm guitar sound is at 0. That means I'm 3.4 decibels louder, so the sound cuts through a bit better. Okay, now for the next crucial element to make your sound big. Those are the spatial effects. These include delay and reverb. You should go through the delay first. I'll show you that here. Here I have what's called the quad delay. That's 4 delays. But it also works with just 1. The important thing is that your delay time matches the tempo of the song. That means if you set a quarter note delay, it should correspond to the quarter notes in the respective song. As I described to you earlier, you can tap that in on delays, but you can also set it up in advance, program it, and then use this setting for the corresponding song. That's another option, so you don't have the hassle of tapping it in. So set the delay time. Here are quarters, a dotted quarter and a half note. Then look for the mix level here on the page. You set a value so that your sound isn't completely watered down by the delay tail, but so that the delay is still noticeable. In my Kemper here it's 70%, 76%, which is quite a lot. But don't be alarmed. in the context of the band, in the context of the song, it doesn't stand out. If anything, it's a good thing. You heard it in the track. I had about that much delay back then in Atlanta too. And you don't perceive it as washed out. So then we have the feedback setting. I already briefly explained that earlier. Feedback means how many times the repetition occurs. And that really nicely fills out your sound, of course. Next, you should add a bit of room reverb, but use it sparingly as well. I'll turn off the delay so you can hear the reverb better. Maybe with a dead note here. I'll turn it off so you can hear the difference. Completely dry with reverb. So just a touch of room added. So that means your signal runs through the entire chain, goes through a well-set delay at the end, and finally you dip the signal in a pinch of reverb to give the sound that final finishing touch, so it sounds nice and hi-fi, and your solo sound really shines. Alright my friends, those are my ingredients for a good solo sound. If you want to hear my current live solo sound, come see me live or check out the video Keinzeruk. Among other things, you can see my entire live guitar solo there. So now explained again briefly and clearly. 5 points you need to nail down. Point 1, guitar. Pickup, definition, instrument. Very clear. Point 2, better a Tubescreamer than even more gain. Give yourself a bit more definition. Point 3, equalizer. Be careful with the highs and presence. Don't set a shrill sound and feel free to use a bit more than usual. Point 4, delay and reverb for spaciousness, for a big tone. And point 5, about 3 decibels more volume than your rhythm sound. This way you'll get a nice solo sound that stands out and cuts through from the other instruments. If you liked my Kemper sound result, you can download it below the video. Exactly the sound I used, the one I showed you the settings for, you can use at home, modify, check out again, or of course play live. The link is below the video. So yes, we're done again. If you enjoyed the workshop, if you learned something new, please give me a like. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. Those are factors that help the channel grow. I would really appreciate it. And you'd be giving a little something back to me for all this information. Thank you very much in advance. Alright, that was the 4th workshop in my series. We've already had the rock sound, the clean sound, the metal sound. Now we have the solo sound. Next up is the crunch guitar sound. You'll be surprised at what a show crunch guitars can put on. That's what I'm going to work on now. See you next week. Go for it and dial in a really nice solo sound. Alright? Thank you for watching and see you next week. Ciao.